A simple woman dragged off plane unfairly. Then her black millionaire husband fired them all. Have you ever witnessed a moment so shocking it made you question everything you thought you knew about right and wrong? Picture this. A quiet, unassuming woman on a crowded Delta Airlines flight, surrounded by onlookers clutching their phones, tears staining her cheeks as security drags her away. Her only crime? A small misunderstanding that spirals wildly out of control. But wait, there's an unexpected twist. Her husband is a powerful black millionaire who will stop at nothing to seek justice. This isn't just a story about an unfair airline encounter. It's a roller coaster journey of heartbreak, revenge, and monumental redemption. Sophia Jenkins, known to most of her friends simply as Sophie, had always lived a humble life. She'd been raised in a tiny rural town in South Carolina, where manners and warmth were second nature, and where people prided themselves on looking out for their neighbors. She was the kind of person who still wrote handwritten letters and carried a beaten leather journal in her handbag to scribble down her reflections on everyday life. At 32, Sophia never imagined she'd be at the center of a national controversy, especially one that would involve an airplane, a brutal misunderstanding, and the wrath of countless strangers on social media. Yet on a crisp autumn morning, she found herself boarding a Delta Airlines flight from John F. Kennedy International Airport in New York City to Los Angeles. Her husband, James Jenkins, a charismatic and self-made black millionaire entrepreneur, had already arrived in California on business. He'd asked Sophia to join him for a charity gala he was hosting to raise funds for underprivileged youth programs. Sophia, excited to support her husband and meet new people, packed her best evening gown and a wide, hopeful smile. That morning, the airport bustled with travelers lugging suitcases, long lines at security, and announcements echoing overhead. Sophia navigated through the crowds with quiet composure, passing shops hawking overpriced coffee and last-minute travel accessories. Her seat was in business class, an upgrade she rarely enjoyed but one that James insisted upon since he traveled so frequently for high-stakes meetings. James, for all his wealth, had never lost his down-to-earth nature. He wanted Sophia to be comfortable, to indulge a little, something she still struggled to do. Sophia boarded the plane early, still wearing a soft, cream-colored sweater and a pair of modest jeans. She was typically more anxious about flying than she cared to admit. The thought of being sealed in a metal tube thousands of feet above the ground unsettled her. Nevertheless, she calmed her nerves by reviewing her little pink notebook that contained notes for the charity gala, names of guests, potential donors, and her own schedule. The cabin was quiet at first. A flight attendant, a blonde woman with a dazzling smile named Carla, welcomed her, checked her ticket, and directed her to seat 4A. Sophia settled into the plush seat, grateful for the extra leg room. She stared out the window, watching airport staff hustle across the tarmac, small vehicles zipping around like mechanical ants. Soon, more passengers trickled in, filling up the aisles with a symphony of rustling clothing and overhead bins slamming shut. An older couple in matching floral shirts sat across the aisle, excitedly discussing their upcoming cruise from the port of Los Angeles. A businessman in a pinstripe suit took the seat behind Sophia, loudly talking on his phone. Bits of conversation floated around, a tapestry of countless personal journeys coinciding in this narrow airplane cabin. Sophia ran a hand through her dark curls, exhaled, and closed her eyes. She whispered a small prayer for a safe flight and a smooth ride. Little did she know this seemingly ordinary flight would mark the beginning of an extraordinary trial, one that would test her patience, her marriage, and her faith in justice. The safety demonstrations had just concluded when Sophia noticed a tall woman sporting an airline uniform come down the aisle. A quick glance at her name tag identified her as Lillian Davis, the head flight attendant. Lillian exuded an air of authority with her sharp gaze, erect posture, and the tight bun that coiled at the back of her head. Although Lillian offered cordial smiles to each row she passed, Sophia's stomach clenched involuntarily as the flight attendant's eyes swept over her without any visible warmth. At first, Sophia tried to brush off the uneasy feeling. She assumed Lillian must be preoccupied with last-minute checks. The plane rumbled to life, rolling away from the gate, the engines humming deeply. Moments later, the pilot's voice crackled overhead, announcing a slight delay due to air traffic congestion. The other passengers groaned in unison, but Sophia tried to remain patient. She opened her notebook again and started reviewing the details of the Los Angeles gala to pass the time. She was so engrossed that she didn't notice Carla offering beverages until Carla gently tapped her shoulder. "Would you like something to drink before we take off, ma'am?" Sophia looked up, startled. "Oh, sorry, yes, I'll have a ginger ale, please." Carla nodded and provided a friendly wink. As Carla moved on, Sophia caught Lillian's cool stare from a few seats away. It sent a chill through her. She wondered if she'd done something wrong. Perhaps Lillian expected all passengers to pay attention during the pre-flight announcements, or to stow their belongings properly. Sophia glanced around, double-checking that her bag was indeed under the seat and her seatbelt was fastened. Everything looked in order. Then, for reasons Sophia could not understand, Lillian strode over to her seat and stood there silently, arms folded, lips pursed. The moment became awkward as Sophia waited for some instruction or feedback. Finally, the flight attendant spoke. "You know it's company policy to have all electronic devices off during taxi," she said curtly. "Are you sure your phone is turned off, ma'am?" Startled, Sophia fumbled for her phone. "Yes, I turned it off at the gate," she answered, holding it up, screen blank. "See? It's off." Lillian gave a perfunctory nod, but no apology. She hovered a second longer before walking away. Sophia's heart fluttered in her chest. She was a rule follower by nature. She rarely even jaywalked. The confrontation felt unprovoked, like a teacher scolding a student for no apparent reason. Yet Sophia brushed it off. Flights were stressful for everyone, especially the crew who had to ensure safety in a metal tube miles above the ground. But Sophia's unease persisted. The plane lurched forward again, engines roaring. She took a sip of ginger ale to calm herself. She wanted this flight over. She missed James, missed the comfort of her husband's presence and his unwavering support. As they taxied onto the runway, Sophia gazed through the small oval window. The blinking runway lights stretched out like distant fireflies. She closed her eyes again, mentally counting down the hours until she could reunite with her husband in Los Angeles. If only she could foresee that the real turbulence had nothing to do with the flight's altitude. The plane reached cruising altitude with minimal turbulence. Passengers shifted in their seats, some dozing, others reading, many scrolling through their phones now that the announcement allowing electronic devices had passed. Sophia relaxed ever so slightly, switching her phone on to send James a quick text, letting him know she'd taken off. Then she flipped it to airplane mode and resumed reading a short article about philanthropic best practices in her notebook. Lunch service began. Carla moved gracefully up and down the aisle, serving trays of prepackaged meals. When she reached Sophia's seat, Carla handed her a salad bowl and some bread. Smiling, Sophia accepted the tray. However, seconds later, Lillian reappeared. Her eyes flicked from Carla to Sophia, her expression betraying what looked like annoyance. "Carla," she said stiffly, "if you don't mind, I'll handle the service in this section." Her tone wasn't a polite request, it was a command. Confused, Carla gave a slight nod and continued down the aisle. Lillian set her hands on her hips. "Ma'am," she addressed Sophia, "do you have any dietary restrictions we need to be aware of? You seem uneasy." Sophia hesitated, uncertain how to respond to a question that felt vaguely accusatory. "No, I'm fine," she answered softly, pushing aside her nerves. "I'm just not a big eater on flights. I get a bit anxious, that's all." Lillian didn't move. "We want everyone to have a safe, comfortable experience on board," she said, her voice carefully measured. "If there's anything we need to do to ensure compliance with regulations, let us know. We can't tolerate—" She paused, eyeing Sophia's closed notebook. "We can't tolerate any disruptions." The comment sounded out of left field. Sophia forced a polite smile, trying to diffuse the tension. "I'm not planning to disrupt anything," she said. "I'm just reading up on a charity event. My husband is hosting it." Lillian's eyes flitted over Sophia's outfit again, perhaps noticing the understated clothes. The tension in the flight attendant's expression seemed inexplicably personal. "You just let us know if you need anything," Lillian repeated, before turning to stride away. A swirl of emotion churned inside Sophia. Confusion, discomfort, a twinge of hurt. She tried rationalizing that Lillian was simply stressed or having a bad day. Yet something about Lillian's demeanor, the pointed way she singled Sophia out, implied prejudice. It wasn't direct enough to confront, but it was unmistakably there. Sophia's heart clenched with the memory of times she had witnessed her husband James facing discrimination as a black man, especially back when he was struggling financially. Now that he was a millionaire, he commanded more respect from people, but underlying biases sometimes surfaced in subtle, ugly ways. Sophia whispered a small prayer, deciding she would remain polite and not engage in any argument with Lillian. She recalled James's unwavering stance: always treat people with respect, but never be afraid to stand up for yourself if pushed too far. Sophia never expected that, in a matter of hours, she would indeed be pushed far beyond her limits. Midway through the flight, the seatbelt sign turned off and passengers began shuffling around. Some headed to the restrooms, others stretched their legs in the aisles. Sophia decided to walk toward the back of the plane, hoping a short stroll would calm her nerves. She also wanted to check the lavatory lines without disturbing anyone in the business class section. Her path led her close to the galley, where she spotted Carla. The younger flight attendant was pouring drinks into plastic cups. She glanced up and noticed Sophia offering a warm smile. "Is everything okay, ma'am?" Carla asked, leaning forward slightly to hear over the hum of the engines. Sophia hesitated, scanning the area to ensure Lillian wasn't nearby. "I'm fine," she said, not wanting to burden Carla, but the worry in her eyes must have been evident. Carla lowered her voice. "Listen," she said, "I'm sorry about earlier. Lillian can be strict. She's been under a lot of pressure." Sophia nodded, understanding it was a delicate subject. "I don't want to cause trouble, I'm trying to keep my head down." Carla sighed. "Don't worry, I'll do what I can to make sure you have a good flight." Grateful, Sophia excused herself to use the restroom. On her way back, she noticed Lillian watching her from the corner of her eye. Sophia returned to her seat and tried to block out negative thoughts by focusing on the upcoming charity gala. She thought about James, about how proud she was of him for dedicating his resources to help underprivileged teens learn valuable entrepreneurship skills. She liked to say that James's heart was even bigger than his bank account. Minutes later, the plane hit a rough patch of turbulence. The seatbelt sign pinged back on, and the captain's voice instructed everyone to remain seated. Sophia felt her stomach drop as the aircraft shuddered. She clutched the armrest, inhaling sharply. As if on cue, Lillian reappeared, checking overhead bins to ensure they were properly latched. Her gaze flicked to Sophia again, as though searching for a reason to scold her. "Ma'am, seatbelt, please," Lillian barked, even though Sophia already had it on. Sophia was starting to feel singled out, no, targeted. Before she could respond, the turbulence intensified. She clung to the armrest, heart pounding, praying for smooth skies. 10 minutes passed before the plane stabilized, and the seatbelt sign pinged off once more. Lillian's voice suddenly came over the intercom, instructing everyone that the situation was now calmer but to remain cautious. Her tone was clipped, with none of the professional warmth one might expect. The tension in the air was palpable, and not just because of the turbulence. A few other passengers exchanged puzzled looks, seemingly having picked up on Lillian's demeanor toward Sophia. Sophia swallowed her frustration and decided she would avoid any further conflict. If that meant staying quiet in her seat for the rest of the flight, so be it. But fate and Lillian had other plans in store. The plane neared the midpoint of the journey. Clouds drifted past the windows, and a lull settled over most of the passengers, who were either napping or reading quietly. Sophia's eyelids felt heavy, and she considered trying to sleep. She leaned her head against the seat, closed her eyes, and let the hum of the engines lull her. A sudden noise jerked her awake, a tray crashing to the floor. She opened her eyes to see Lillian scowling down at a spilled beverage cart. A young attendant, looking mortified, scrambled to wipe up the liquid that had splattered across the aisle. Tension was thick as Lillian reprimanded the attendant in a harsh whisper. Sophia frowned sympathetically. This entire flight felt like a powder keg waiting to explode, all triggered by Lillian's volatile energy. Part of her wanted to help, but she didn't dare stand up without permission, especially given Lillian's earlier admonitions. She watched as the young attendant cleaned the aisle. Lillian turned around, only to catch Sophia staring. "Do you need something, ma'am?" Lillian snapped. Sophia averted her gaze. "No, I'm fine," she replied quietly. "Then please keep your eyes to yourself," Lillian hissed in a low tone. A hot flush crept up Sophia's neck. She'd never been spoken to like that on a flight, or anywhere in public, really. "I didn't mean any harm," she said, trying to remain calm. At that moment, the pinstripe-suited businessman behind Sophia leaned forward. "Excuse me," he said, addressing Lillian. "She's not bothering anyone. Could you tone it down?" Lillian whipped around, her face tight with disapproval. "Sir, this is none of your concern." The man sat back, raising his eyebrows. "Unbelievable," he muttered. Now the rest of the cabin was paying attention. Sensing eyes on her, Lillian stepped back, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "I would appreciate it if you—" She pointed at Sophia. "Stop giving my crew a hard time." Sophia blinked. "I haven't said anything to your crew," she replied gently, her voice quivering with a mixture of confusion and fear. Lillian's complexion darkened. "We've had complaints about your behavior. From who?" Sophia asked, baffled. Her heart was pounding. Adrenaline coursed through her veins. Was she truly about to be accused of some wrongdoing? Before Lillian could answer, Carla appeared, a concerned frown pulling at her features. "Lillian, I can handle this." "I'll handle this," Lillian snapped. She placed a hand on her hip and leaned over Sophia. "One more disturbance from you and I'll have security waiting when we land. Do you understand?" Sophia felt tears prick her eyes. She'd never imagined she'd be threatened with security for merely existing in her seat. She nodded, too stunned to speak. But what happened next forced the conflict from simmer to boil. The plane encountered another mild jolt of turbulence. The half-finished glass of ginger ale in Sophia's tray wobbled and tipped forward, spilling onto Lillian's shoes. Time seemed to slow. Lillian gasped, looking at the wet splashes across her polished black pumps. Without waiting for an explanation, the head flight attendant exploded. "How dare you?" Lillian spat, stepping back as though Sophia had thrown the drink at her intentionally. "You think you can assault a flight attendant and just get away with it?" Sophia's eyes widened in horror. "That was an accident. The plane—" "You're done," Lillian barked, her voice carrying through the entire cabin. "I will not tolerate aggression from anyone, that's it. We're diverting this flight." Passengers exchanged alarmed glances. Carla tried to intervene. "Lillian, let's not be hasty. It was an accident." But Lillian was already marching toward the cockpit. She barked something into the intercom, and shortly thereafter, the pilot announced they'd be making an unscheduled landing in Denver due to a disruptive passenger. Sophia's jaw dropped. Her stomach twisted into knots. She wanted to defend herself, to scream her innocence, but shock left her mute. She could only manage a shaky whisper. "What is happening?" The emergency landing in Denver International Airport felt surreal. Passengers peeked out their windows, seeing the terminal bustling with activity. A hush fell over the cabin as the plane taxied to a remote gate, away from the usual passenger jet bridges. Sophia's mind raced, every thought filled with dread. She'd never been in trouble with the law. She paid her taxes on time, donated to charity, helped at local shelters. She prided herself on kindness. Now she was painted as a disruptive passenger who'd assaulted a flight attendant. The injustice of it all sent her pulse skyrocketing. When the plane halted, Lillian instructed everyone to remain seated. Then she turned to Sophia with cold eyes. "Gather your things and step into the aisle," she ordered. Sophia's hands trembled as she unclasped her seatbelt. She rose, her heart thundering in her chest. She clutched her small purse, not sure what else to do. A heavy silence blanketed the cabin. Her fellow passengers wore expressions ranging from pity to confusion to outrage. Carla stood a few rows behind, visibly upset, but seemingly powerless in the face of her superior's orders. The older couple across the aisle glanced at Sophia in sympathy. The businessman in pinstripes shook his head in disgust, muttering something about ridiculous overreaction. Sophia looked down, tears brimming in her eyes. Her voice wobbled as she tried to speak. "I didn't do anything wrong," she pleaded, her gaze flicking from Lillian to Carla, hoping for a lifeline. But Lillian merely stepped aside, gesturing toward the exit with a theatrical sweep of her arm. 2 uniformed airport security officers boarded. One of them, tall and burly, reached for her. "Ma'am, please come with us," he said in a low, neutral tone. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Without further ceremony, the officers led her away from her seat, their grips gentle yet firm on her arms. She looked over her shoulder, seeing Carla's anguished face and hearing a chorus of murmurs ripple through the cabin. A few smartphones were raised. She was too overwhelmed to comprehend the magnitude of being recorded. But somewhere in her mind, she registered that her humiliation was now public. She was taken to the front of the plane, forced through the cabin door and onto the jetway, which was swarming with more security personnel. The lights of the terminal glared and her head spun. It felt like a nightmare, a bizarre, disorienting dream that she couldn't wake from. She wanted to cry out for James, for her husband who was thousands of miles away, completely unaware of what was happening. Once inside, one of the officers pulled out a pair of plastic restraints just as a precaution. Another officer stepped forward, brows furrowed. "We have to follow protocol, ma'am," he said, guiding her firmly through the corridor. "We'll question you in a private area." "Please," Sophia croaked, tears sliding down her face. "I haven't done anything. That was an accident." The officer nodded but offered no reassurance. In the background, airline staff hurried about, some glancing curiously at the spectacle of a weeping woman being escorted through the staff corridors of the airport. Finally, they reached an isolated hallway where a stern-faced supervisor stood waiting. The entire world felt surreal to Sophia, whose mind replayed the moment the drink spilled over and over again. If only she had placed the cup in the holder. If only she hadn't even accepted the ginger ale. If only, if only. Her thoughts eventually landed on James, and a surge of hope coursed through her. James would fix this. He would move mountains to protect her. The same man who'd fought all his life against bigotry, who had built a multi-million-dollar empire from scratch. He wouldn't stand for this injustice. She just needed to call him, to explain everything. But that moment wouldn't come easily. The airline staff had another plan in mind, to treat her like a threat until she could prove otherwise. And that was only the beginning of a series of events that would flip her world upside down. Tucked away in a small, fluorescent-lit airport office, Sophia sat in a metal folding chair, her purse and carry-on confiscated. Her hands shook as she tried to steady her breath. 2 security officers stood by the door, and a middle-aged airport authority official behind a small desk leafed through paperwork. "Miss Jenkins," the official began, adjusting his reading glasses. "We have reports of a disturbance on Flight 647 from JFK to Los Angeles. We understand you caused trouble for the flight crew and had to be removed. Now you have the opportunity to share your side of the story." Sophia closed her eyes. She explained everything as best as she could, from the moment she noticed Lillian's odd behavior to the spilled ginger ale. She emphasized that it was purely accidental, caused by turbulence. The official listened, expression neutral. After she finished, he tapped a pen against the desk. "We'll need statements from the crew and other passengers. In the meantime, we'll have to hold you here. It could take hours to sort this out." Tears welled up again. She blinked them back fiercely. "I need to call my husband," she said, voice wavering. "He's a lawyer." That was a partial lie. James wasn't a lawyer, but he had an army of them on retainer. "I need legal counsel, please." The official glanced at the clock on the wall. "We can allow you one phone call," he said. With a nod to one of the security officers, he gestured for them to hand Sophia her purse. She nearly sobbed with relief when she wrapped her trembling fingers around her cell phone. It took 2 tries to punch in her unlock code. She scrolled to find James's number, which was pinned at the top of her favorites. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She worried he was in a meeting, or worse, had his phone on silent. Just when she feared she'd miss him, he answered. "My love, I was just about to text you. Everything all right?" At the sound of his warm baritone, the tears flowed again. "James," she managed to say between shaky breaths. "They dragged me off the plane in Denver. They say I assaulted a flight attendant. I don't know what to do. Please help me." She heard James inhale sharply on the other end. "What?" His voice vibrated with concern, then sharpened with anger. "What do you mean they dragged you off the plane? Tell me everything." Sophia squeezed her eyes shut, pulling herself together enough to give him a condensed version of events. She ended by whispering, "Please, James, I need you." He didn't hesitate. "I'm going to fix this. I'm calling my lawyer right away. Stay calm. Do whatever they say, but don't sign anything until we talk. I'll be there as soon as I can, or I'll get someone there. Just hang in there, baby. We'll make this right." Despite her terror, hearing James's unwavering support grounded her. She hung up, tears still rolling down her face, but her heart felt slightly lighter. She clutched the phone, ignoring the impatient stare of the security officer, and silently prayed that James would pull every string he could to free her from this nightmare. James Jenkins was no ordinary businessman. A tall, broad-shouldered man in his late 30s, he commanded respect the moment he walked into a room. Born and raised in an impoverished neighborhood in Chicago, James had overcome staggering odds to create a flourishing investment firm. His philanthropic projects had garnered national attention, and while he wasn't a household name, those in elite circles knew and respected him. As soon as he ended the call with Sophia, he felt a cold, determined fury settle over him. He was in the middle of finalizing details for his charity gala, set to take place in 2 days, ironically focused on fighting discrimination and promoting equality of opportunity for inner-city youth. Now, he faced a crisis of his own that exemplified exactly the sort of injustice he fought against, the quickness of certain institutions to villainize someone who seemed out of place. James wasted no time. He reached into his pocket and dialed his personal attorney, David Wheeler, a formidable lawyer known for his dogged dedication to justice. David picked up on the first ring. "What's up, boss?" James relayed the story swiftly. He ended with, "I want a team in Denver now. Get them on the next flight, private if necessary. I need them to represent my wife, ensure her release, and gather all the evidence. Witnesses, passenger statements, flight logs, everything." David murmured his agreement, promising to send a specialized legal team to Denver immediately. But James wasn't done. His next call was to Delta Airlines corporate headquarters. He demanded to speak to someone in authority about the incident on Flight 647. Predictably, he was routed through layers of customer service reps who apologized profusely but couldn't grant him access to a high-level executive on short notice. James left a concise, pointed message. "This is James Jenkins, regarding Flight 647, forcibly removing my wife, Sophia Jenkins. I expect a return call from an executive immediately. This is a matter of grave legal concern." Next, he called the manager of his personal security team. "I want my men on alert. We might need to step up protection for Sophia once she's out. Also, coordinate with David's legal team in Denver. Whatever resources they need, get it done." Finally, with the critical moves in play, James set out to find the earliest possible flight from LAX to Denver. He'd promised Sophia he'd be there, and James Jenkins was a man of his word. All the while, a knot of fear twisted in his gut. He knew airlines rarely diverted planes without serious cause, and flight attendants typically had significant authority in these matters. It was entirely plausible that the airline would try to stick to a narrative that kept them in the clear, painting Sophia as the aggressor. But James had two powerful resources: unyielding determination and deep pockets. He'd spent his entire life learning how to fight back against systems that tried to keep him down. He'd faced racism, classism, and cynics who called him crazy for chasing his ambitious dreams. None of them had stopped him. Now, facing down the might of a multi-billion-dollar airline might be his biggest fight yet. But for Sophia, he would take on any challenge. Back at the Denver airport, Sophia's experience mirrored an endless loop of questions and waiting. Various officials asked her to recount her story multiple times. She was fingerprinted, an indignity that made her feel like a criminal. All the while, she had no clarity on when or if she would be free to go. Lillian's statement, apparently, was damning enough to keep Sophia detained for investigative purposes. Exhausted, Sophia slumped in a chair in a plain white interview room. Her eyes were red from crying. She ached to see James's face. Occasionally, an airport official would poke their head in to say they were still gathering information. Passengers who had witnessed the incident were being asked to provide statements. Sophia prayed that the kind strangers on the plane, the businessman, the older couple, would come forward with the truth. Hours dragged by. The door opened, and a tall, dark-haired man in a crisp suit entered, accompanied by a petite woman carrying a leather briefcase. "Mrs. Jenkins?" the man said in a reassuring tone. "I'm Andrew Carter, one of the lawyers sent by your husband. This is my colleague, Karen Lee. We're here to represent you." Relief flooded Sophia's face. She stood, her knees wobbling, and accepted Andrew's handshake. Karen gently patted her on the shoulder, offering a sympathetic smile. Immediately, they began discussing the facts of the case in hushed tones, taking meticulous notes. Andrew stepped out to speak with the airport authorities, brandishing his credentials. Karen stayed with Sophia, explaining the legal steps they'd take. "We're requesting your immediate release," she said firmly. "We have multiple passenger statements indicating that the flight attendant's reaction was unwarranted. We'll also obtain any available flight recordings or internal camera footage from the aircraft if any exist." Sophia's eyes widened. "I didn't even think about cameras. That might clear me." Karen's lips pressed into a thin line. Airlines often claim they don't have cameras in the cabin, but sometimes they do. Regardless, we have enough corroborating statements, especially from that gentleman in business class who already emailed us a typed account of the incident. He also attached a short cell phone video clip he managed to record, showing you with the spilled drink and the sudden outburst from the attendant. Sophia exhaled a trembling breath. "Thank God for good people." Karen nodded. "We'll use every bit of evidence and we'll hold the airline accountable." Within a half hour, Andrew returned, a small but triumphant smile on his face. "They've agreed to release you. We still have to sort out the legal ramifications, but for now you're free to go. Let's get you out of here." Sophia felt as if invisible shackles had fallen from her wrists. She clutched her purse and followed them through the winding corridors until they reached the main concourse. The neon lights and bustling crowds were jarring after her hours in detention. She paused, took a deep breath, and looked around. They reached the arrivals area, and Sophia glanced at the digital boards showing flights. She thought of James, praying he was safe on his way to Denver, or that he was sending someone else. Right on cue, she heard a commotion. She turned to see James striding across the polished floor, flanked by two of his personal security guards. Relief swept through her, and she ran into his arms. James enveloped Sophia in a protective embrace, his large hands cradling her head. She felt his heart thudding against her ear. For a few moments, they just held each other, letting the warmth of their mutual love quell the lingering terror. Andrew and Karen discreetly stepped aside, granting them privacy. One of James's security guards lingered, scanning the crowd for any cameras or reporters. Already the story was beginning to bubble up on social media, with multiple passengers tweeting about the injustice they had witnessed. Finally, James pulled back, looking into Sophia's eyes. "You okay?" he asked, voice taut with concern. She nodded, though tears still glimmered. "Now that you're here." He guided her to a quieter corner, Andrew, Karen, and the guards following behind. Once they were seated, Andrew summarized their next moves. "We need to file a formal complaint against Delta. We also need to get a statement from that flight attendant, Carla, who seemed sympathetic. We believe her testimony would be invaluable in proving your innocence." Karen glanced at Sophia. "You should rest. The emotional toll of this is heavy, and we'll handle the bulk of the legal matters. The main question is, do you want to go through with the gala, or do you want to postpone?" Sophia's lips parted, a wave of conflict washing over her. She had poured her heart into assisting James with the gala planning. It represented more than just a social event. It was a beacon of hope for underprivileged teens. Yet exhaustion weighed her down. Sensing her inner turmoil, James gently squeezed her hand. "My love, your well-being comes first. We can reschedule." But a spark flickered in Sophia's eyes. "No," she said firmly. "This is exactly the kind of injustice your foundation stands against. I won't let them steal our moment to do good." Tears threatened again, but she steadied her voice. "We proceed. I won't hide at home." James smiled, pride shining in his eyes. He turned to Andrew. "All right, make it happen. We'll fly back to LA tomorrow morning once we finalize any formalities here. Let the airline know we're filing suits for wrongful detention, emotional distress, and discrimination. I also want that flight crew grounded until we get to the bottom of this. If they can so blatantly lie about my wife, they're a danger to all passengers." Andrew and Karen exchanged glances. They knew James's reputation for being relentless when seeking justice. "We'll do it," Karen said. "We'll coordinate with the local team here in Denver and keep you informed." Sophia felt a surge of gratitude for her husband's unwavering support and the competence of their legal team. She was determined not to be merely a victim of prejudice, but an advocate for change. As the adrenaline waned, a bone-deep exhaustion settled over her. Her eyes stung, and she leaned into James's shoulder. "Let's go to a hotel," he said softly, planting a kiss on her forehead. "We have a lot to do tomorrow, but for now, let's try to get you some rest." Overnight, the story went viral. Passengers from Flight 647 posted tweets and short videos, showing Sophia being escorted off the plane in tears. Some alleged that Lillian's behavior was racially motivated, or at least rooted in prejudice. Others were more cautious, calling it a misunderstanding. A passenger blogged about how the plane had diverted unnecessarily, causing inconvenience and panic for everyone on board. By the time James and Sophia woke in the hotel, mainstream media outlets had picked up the narrative. Passenger dragged off Delta flight after altercation with flight attendant. But beneath the sensational headlines, the details were emerging, painting the flight attendant's reaction as grossly disproportionate. Sophia scrolled through articles on her phone, eyes widening at the scope of public reactions. Some sympathized with her, condemning the airline. Others labeled her a troublemaker. One post read, "These are the hidden ways discrimination happens, folks. Seems like the flight attendant had it in for her." Another said, "Watch the videos. She's obviously the victim here. That flight attendant is a psycho." Still another commented, "Did she think she was too good for economy? I bet she was acting entitled." The sea of opinions was overwhelming. "Look, you can't read too much into internet chatter," James said, gently taking the phone from her. "People will say whatever they want online." Sophia closed her eyes. "It's just so humiliating. And it's not just me they're targeting now. Some are making racially charged comments about you. It's sickening." He sighed, frustration etched on his face. "That's the ugly reality of the world we're in. But we'll fight back the right way, legally and ethically." And a knock on the door announced Andrew, Karen, and David, James's top attorney who had flown in overnight. David wasted no time. "We have enough preliminary evidence to file suit. We'd like to do that today. We also want to demand an internal investigation by Delta. Our sources say that Carla is willing to testify on your behalf, along with at least 4 other passengers. James's jaw tightened. Do it. And I want to address the media. I'm not going to let them control the narrative. Are you sure? Andrew cautioned. This could get messy. Legally, it might be safer to keep a low profile until we have more info. James shook his head. No, that flight attendant publicly humiliated my wife, calling her a threat, a criminal. We have to clear her name. A plan formed. They would hold a short press conference outside the Denver courthouse after filing their lawsuit, reaffirming their commitment to justice and demanding accountability. Sophia touched James's arm. I want to speak too, she said, voice quavering but determined. I have a right to say my piece. He searched her eyes, nodded. Then we'll do it together. Later that afternoon, James and Sophia stood on the courthouse steps, flanked by their attorneys. Microphones and cameras were thrust in their faces. The crisp Colorado air stung Sophia's cheeks as reporters shouted questions. James raised a hand, and the cacophony quieted. My name is James Jenkins, he began, his deep voice echoing across the plaza. My wife, Sophia Jenkins, was forcibly removed from Delta Airlines Flight 647 for a so-called assault on a flight attendant. We categorically deny these accusations, and we have video and eyewitness accounts that prove Sophia did nothing wrong. We believe this was a case of severe overreaction, possibly fueled by prejudice. Sophia cleared her throat, nerves racking her body. She stepped to the microphone, a tremor in her voice. I'm just an ordinary person. I never sought publicity, and I have always tried to treat others with kindness and respect. I was terrified. I was humiliated in front of everyone on that plane. I don't want anyone else to experience what I went through. She took a deep breath. We're calling for Delta to investigate its employees, especially the flight attendant who instigated this incident, and to ensure their policies prevent such abuses of power in the future. A volley of questions erupted. The attorneys stepped in to manage them, directing inquiries about the timeline, possible settlement, and whether racial bias was at play. James responded diplomatically but firmly. We'll let the evidence speak for itself. Within hours, the press conference footage spread across social media. Discussion on talk shows and news programs ballooned. The public scrutiny on Lillian grew. Meanwhile, Delta issued a guarded statement. We take all passenger disputes seriously and are cooperating with authorities. We do not tolerate discrimination or aggressive behavior on any of our flights. The phrase aggressive behavior struck a nerve with James and Sophia. They fired back, accusing Delta of false equivalency. More passengers from Flight 647 came forward to the media, describing the flight attendant's bizarre hostility toward Sophia, confirming that the spillage was nothing more than a simple accident. Eventually, Delta's corporate office called James personally, offering to settle. They wanted the story to disappear, fearing a full-blown PR crisis. But James refused an under-the-table agreement. He demanded an official apology, systemic policy changes, and accountability for the attendant who had weaponized her authority. Under the mounting pressure, Delta announced the suspension of Lillian and an internal review of her conduct, as well as mandatory sensitivity training for cabin crew. The airline also sent a high-ranking executive to meet with James and Sophia in Los Angeles, hoping to negotiate. James took the meeting, but on his own terms. He insisted that the press be notified of any outcome. No more backroom deals. Despite the chaos, James and Sophia pressed forward with the charity gala in Los Angeles. Held in the grand ballroom of a 5-star hotel, the event sparkled with celebrities, philanthropists, business moguls, and local community leaders. The cause was to raise money to provide entrepreneurship, education, and financial literacy to youth in underserved neighborhoods. Sophia arrived in a flowing midnight blue gown that accentuated her graceful figure. Cameras flashed as she stepped out of the limousine with James by her side. She tried to maintain composure, though her heart fluttered at the memory of the day's earlier headlines. She and James greeted guests, shook hands, and exchanged pleasantries. The air buzzed with excitement, both for the cause and the swirling news coverage. The night progressed beautifully. Attendees opened their wallets generously, some motivated by sympathy for what Sophia endured. By midnight, the foundation had raised triple its usual amount. A sense of triumph pulsed through the room. Toward the end of the evening, James took the stage to deliver a speech. He thanked everyone for coming and for supporting the foundation's mission. Then he paused, looking down at Sophia with a tender smile. "I want to dedicate this night to the strongest woman I know, my wife, Sophia. She has shown courage, resilience, and love in the face of adversity. This week we witnessed firsthand the ugly side of prejudice and abuse of power. But we also witnessed the beauty of solidarity. Strangers defended her, our friends stood by us, and the public demanded accountability. That's what this foundation is all about, standing up for what's right, empowering those who can't fight for themselves." Tears glimmered in Sophia's eyes as thunderous applause erupted. She felt a wave of gratitude for the outpouring of support. In that moment, the humiliating ordeal began to transform in her mind, from a traumatic event into a catalyst for change. Back in Denver, the investigation into Lillian's behavior unearthed a troubling pattern of complaints from previous passengers. Multiple accusations of rudeness and intimidation had been quietly filed away by the airline, never properly addressed. Now, with a media spotlight glaring down, those records came to light. The airline was forced to terminate Lillian's employment. Furthermore, the FAA launched its own inquiry into whether she had abused her authority to divert a plane unnecessarily. Meanwhile, a separate storm brewed for the Denver airport officials who had detained Sophia. More than one official faced scrutiny for the speed at which they accepted Lillian's story and escalated the situation without fully investigating. Some were reprimanded, others placed on leave, pending an internal review. But the hardest karma came for Lillian herself. She not only lost her job, she found herself at the center of lawsuits from James and Sophia's legal team, seeking damages for defamation and emotional distress. Public sentiment didn't favor her after the recorded videos showed her yelling at Sophia and ordering the plane diverted for what was clearly an accident. In a desperate attempt to salvage her reputation, Lillian gave an interview to a local news station, claiming she acted under extreme stress and truly believed Sophia posed a threat. But her story crumbled when pressed with contradictory passenger accounts. Online commentators condemned her. She lost not only her career, but any semblance of public sympathy. As part of the settlement negotiation, Delta offered a formal apology to Sophia, publicly acknowledging it had failed to protect her from an employee's misconduct. In a rare move, they also paid a large sum to the Jenkins Foundation, effectively turning the fiasco into a charitable boon. James and Sophia insisted the money go toward building a new mentorship program that taught youth about law and civil rights, ensuring future generations were better equipped to handle injustices. Months passed, but the incident remained a watershed moment for Sophia and James. Their lawsuit against Delta resulted in an out-of-court settlement that included reformed flight attendant training protocols. The public outcry spurred other airlines to revisit their own policies on handling passenger disputes. Airlines began investing in de-escalation training and bias awareness programs to avoid similar scandals. Sophia herself gained unexpected fame. Invitations to speak at women's forums and civil rights conferences poured in. At first she was hesitant. She was at heart a quiet soul. But with James's encouragement she found her voice, using her platform to highlight everyday prejudice and the importance of standing up for oneself. The greatest victory, however, was a personal one. Through adversity, Sophia discovered her strength, and James reaffirmed his devotion. They had always been a devoted couple, but this trial by fire welded their bond even more. One sunny afternoon, as they strolled through a park in downtown Los Angeles, Sophia turned to James and said, "Everything we went through, it changed me. I'm not the same woman I was before." James nodded, holding her hand. "Neither am I. But maybe that's okay. We're wiser, stronger, and we're doing good things with what happened." They paused to watch a group of teenagers play basketball, shouting encouragement to one another. Sophia blinked back emotion. "I want to keep fighting for them, for every kid who faces discrimination, for every adult who's made to feel powerless." James squeezed her hand. "We will, baby. Together." And so they continued forward, a power couple forged not just by wealth, but by the unbreakable conviction that no act of prejudice should ever go unchallenged. Their story became a catalyst, a shining example of how sometimes the simplest among us, armed with truth, love, and a fiercely protective partner, can stand up to giants and win. Sometimes, one small moment can reshape an entire future. From a spilled drink on a turbulent flight, Sophia and James's love and resolve were tested like never before. But instead of breaking, they rose above cruelty and fear, turning despair into triumph. They showed us that ordinary people, backed by truth and solidarity, can demand justice from powerful institutions. Do you believe in standing up for what's right, no matter how difficult the battle? If Sophia's journey moved you, we invite you to stay connected. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel to hear more incredible stories that spark hope, courage, and unity. Your support helps these messages of justice and perseverance reach countless others who need inspiration. Remember, when we band together, no force, no matter how intimidating, can silence our voices or dim our light. Thank you for watching, and let's continue building a world where respect and compassion shine brightest.